Welcome back. Let's continue with our next session and welcome to the stage, Jamal Bellhouse, Test Quality Assurance Manager at the British Council.
Thank you, Harold, and thank you to New Directions for having me today. I assume you can see there it is. Okay, I can see it now. Fantastic. So yes, I'm Gemma Bellhouse and I'm the Test Product Quality Assurance Manager for Aptis, the British Council's 4-skills computer-based English language tests. I work within the Global Assessments team and I oversee the pre-testing, test build and online platform and the quality control processes and policies of Aptis and our other tests. I also provide support for the management of the special accommodations for Aptis test candidates, which falls under the broad category of EDI for Aptis. As you may well know already, EDI stands for Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion. And today I'll be talking to you about EDI and Aptis and what has been happening at the British Council, just as the title of my presentation states. We'll look at our new Aptus Remote test delivery and other current projects that are relevant to Global Assessment's English language tests. So first, let's look at EDI at the British Council. The British Council tries to be a leader in promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion, which are important themes for our products around the world, whether in the arts, society, inclusive education, teaching English, or in the exams that we offer. And we refer to the idea of mainstreaming the EDI thinking into our processes. I think you may be able to see the word mainstreaming there, it's a bit light. So we mainstream into our processes because EDI is integral to each and every stage of our products and policies. You can see a visual framework representation here on the slide in the 6 areas of diversity that go around the outer circle: age, disability, ethnicity or race, gender, religion or belief, and sexual identity. We integrate these areas into the legal, business, and moral approaches of our products with the hope to make everyone's experiences richer and ultimately lead to more inclusive societies. The legal obligations are generally regulated by government, of course, and other official bodies. The moral reasons include fairness and social justice. And business reasons, well, winning clients, we have actually won new contracts on the basis of our EDI capabilities and what we can offer. Let's take a look at types of special accommodations that some of the Aptis candidates need and how we go about deciding and providing them. Accommodations can be either 1 changes to the test format or 2 changes to the delivery. So that's perhaps the context of the test or the format. These changes make the test accessible to test takers with physical or invisible disabilities. The process is usually initiated by a request from the test taker or the client, and we usually need to consider 3 questions. At least 3 questions. So first, is the test really necessary? For example, giving a listening test to a hearing impaired candidate may not actually be useful. The scores may not be useful for them. Then, have they taken a test before? Maybe they've done language tests at a school or university, and they were given special accommodations and they worked well. So this may be this may be the approach that we want to take again. And thirdly, we identify their individual specific needs. So all test takers are unique. Not all ADHD candidates will require the same amount of extra time, or will they need a private room? So after their needs have been identified, there are several options. There can be some physical access arrangements at the test center. Keeping in mind Aptis is computer-based, potentially the test should be taken face-to-face or with a pen and paper version, although this is rare because the technology on our platform can usually provide the flexibility for accommodations. And maybe there are other accommodations that it can't. So maybe we need to create a Braille version or a PDF for a screen reader. And finally, we might just end up providing an exemption for a skill based on their needs. Since the beginning of Aptis, the EDI query system has been completely individualized. Rather than standardizing the EDI offering, so for example, offering the same accommodation to every candidate with a hearing impairment, we want to find the best solution and correct accommodations for each test candidate. It may be that we need to create extra resources for the test candidate, or we may need to consult with members of the assessment research group or people from the business and marketing team. And we may need to work directly with Aptis examiners to get a skill marked offline, and this can take longer. So for that reason, we ask that EDI queries are raised 6 to 8 weeks in advance of the test dates, although typically that much time is not needed. Moving on to Aptus Remote. Last year, our processes were forced to change, as they were for many exam boards. From the very onset of COVID-19, the typical test center delivery was suspended around the world, which I suspect you're all aware of. And in direct response to the new world we found ourselves in, the Global Assessments team immediately got to work on a new test delivery model and solution. Aptus Remote offers a new way of secure testing and combines the benefits of online testing with video monitoring to ensure a secure experience and reliable results. As part of the overall test delivery process, candidates must first register their ID details before the test day sitting, verify their identity, do a face scan, and then again validate their ID on the test day right before completing the online Aptis test. The software ProctorTrack monitors the candidate by recording a video of the candidate while they're taking the test, and then it provides alerts on unusual activities which are reviewed after the test by our test administrators. So they're reviewed by people, not just computers. Unusual activities can include the candidate leaving the room or looking away from the screen for a long time. And these additional levels of security ensure accuracy and validity of the test. And as always, we provide a fast turnaround of results. That being said, it's not as simple as it sounds, and there have been some difficulties in implementing this new mode of delivery and some lessons learned through the trials. In order to launch Aptis Remote, like with other products created by the British Council, it had to go through what is called an ESIA. ESIA stands for Equality Screening and Impact Assessment. The aim of this assessment is to improve policies and products by ensuring equality and inclusion at all stages of the customer experience. If you work for the British Council, it's probable that you've already heard of this, and maybe you've even participated in one of these yourselves. The screening is accomplished in 2 steps. Firstly, a range of equality screening questions and categories are reviewed by the product owner or manager. And after the manager reviews these questions, if it's deemed necessary by the ESA management, a panel of people are invited to discuss the product in all its aspects. And it's at this stage an action plan is raised if there are any gaps identified. Groups of this assessment and the questions involved include people of different ages, types of adult carers, a range of disabilities, ethnic and minority groups, and different genders. During the ESIA panel discussion for Aptis Remote test delivery, many questions were raised about the policy and its implementation, including what if the candidate needs to leave the room, for example, to take a toilet break or to feed a baby? What if the candidate has undergone a gender transition recently and the ID is not accepted by the software? And what if the candidate is wearing a headscarf that covers their face and they cannot be identified by ProctorTrack? And also, what if the candidate does not have a suitable room with enough privacy at home for a complete 4 skills test? These and many more questions were raised. It became apparent that while we expected the remote delivery to create more accessibility, there was still work to do. We had to wonder, are we allowing more people the chance to take their English test, or are we in fact making the test even less accessible for some people, depending on factors that are perhaps outside of their control? 2 clear action points that arose from the ESA discussions were to translate the instructions for Aptis into local languages. So the instructions for the test, not anything within the test itself, just to clarify. And to also provide more direct administrative support to the test candidates as well, because normally they would get that administrative support within the test center. Aptis Remote test delivery was born from the impact of COVID-19 and the quick need for delivery flexibility for test candidates around the world. However, it has now become a core offering of Aptis and an important option for many clients. And we have identified some issues to improve on thanks to the ESIA process, and our team is now working on these resulting actions. We acknowledge that we are a small team, but we know it is imperative that we maximize our test product inclusivity. Our aim is to make Aptis available to all English language learners, no matter their disability, their group, or their context. So on to something a little bit different. During the year 2020, last year, several social issues were brought to the close attention of the world. This has led organizations like the British Council to rethink and review our own way of doing things. Are we mainstreaming the EDI approach into our policies and products as well as we claim? This heightened awareness of world issues has given us this opportunity to glimpse inwards, to consider our own biases, and to reflect on the organization's influence. We've been working to inspect our potential to resolve these inequalities and injustices. Firstly, within the organization and amongst our colleagues, including our thousands of English teachers worldwide. And secondly, regarding our English language products and policies that can influence the world at large. We have a new internal working group for colleagues who are involved in exams and interested in becoming more active in EDI projects. Sorry about the noise. The group is called EDI and Exams, and one of the action points on the group's agenda from the very beginning was to carry out an EDI-specific review of our test content. I was appointed to manage this as I manage the item bank and its quality, and along with Dr. Elena Rossi, one of our Aptis item writers, we both carried out the review in March of this year. We took a very careful look at all of a lot of our Aptis general content, and we made observations with these three categories in mind, as you can see on the slide. First, group representation. Are minority and vulnerable groups represented when possible, such as in images and accents, and how can we better ensure a strong representation? Secondly, a privilege balance. This refers to a review of gender and other biases, such as ethnicity, and we looked at the assignment of authority, especially within the tasks. For example, who's the expert in the interview between a male and a female? And who is serving whom in a photo of a restaurant? Thirdly, for the category of sociocultural range, we considered the context and environment related to privileged and Western stereotypes and assumptions of class, such as who has access to holidays and technology even. These three categories arose from my background reading on the topics and the understanding of the ESIA process. So what did we find? Going into this review, to be honest, I actually didn't expect to find very much. I had full confidence in our test. We did decide to review a lot of content for this reason. So we had more of a chance to investigate what could potentially be improved. And the review was exactly that, not just to investigate and report, but to focus on future improvements. Elena Rossi did her PhD in item writer training, and my background before working for the British Council also lies in item writer training and test production. So we especially wanted to come up with a set of guidelines for the item writers based on the findings of this review. I was a little nervous, actually, we'd have nothing to write up, but in fact, we found more than we bargained for, and 3 months later, I am still writing up the report of the review and the resulting recommendations. That in mind, I'm going to give you a few snippets of the results as a taster, and actually, you're my first audience for this, and in fact, many of my close colleagues haven't even seen this data yet, so it's a bit exciting for me to reveal it. I'll discuss one aspect of the review for each of the three EDI categories I just mentioned, and also for three different skills or components of the test. Firstly, for listening, I chose the findings for group representation to show to you today. I've compiled the statistics for the represented accents in the audios. It's a nice aspect of the review to visualize and also to explain, it's quite straightforward. While there was some representation of other standard English accents and accents that were not of a standard English, the results were a bit disappointing. As you can see, less than half of the tests had representation from other standard British accents and European accents, and also representing a variety of age. And then 25% or less of the tests represented accents from other majority Anglophone countries or countries outside Europe, and 0% of the tests represented Black voices. Now, I believe it's very possible for every listening test to have some representation of most, if not all, of these categories. This is a good area to give some standard guidelines for the item writers and also to see some instant improvement. So we're working on that right now with our recording studio and have a session lined up next week with some new voice actors. Now let's look at grammar and vocabulary, and specifically the privilege balance. So in particular, looking at the gender biases and stereotypes that cropped up. I'm not going to give you numbers, statistics for this one, but I've listed some of the general stereotypes that were sometimes observed in the tasks. As you can see, these themes are quite typical of traditional binary gender roles. The man is strong and successful, and the woman is objectified and weak. Now, the British Council is a leading organization in equality of the sexes and also LGBTQ rights and representation, and believes strongly in discouraging stereotypical gender roles. Not only this, the British Council creates opportunities actively for learning and knowledge sharing on addressing gender inequalities globally, as noted in the British Council Guide to Addressing Gender Equality. As we notice some of this type of stereotyping in the tasks, however small each implication and association within a task was, it became quickly apparent to my team that this was an important milestone in recognition and awareness. Therefore, I immediately made this a priority in the quality review stages of test content sign-off. So that's already been implemented. And finally, for the writing, we'll come to the third EDI content review category. This is sociocultural inclusion, and in particular, looking at any Anglocentric and middle-class bias inherent in the tasks. Some themes cropped up that seem particularly accessible and easier to respond to for people who have lived in Western and privileged contexts. That being said, this is often the vocabulary that English language learners are given in a classroom. And while some experience varies across the board for candidates, and it always will, it must be recognized that there are also limitations in topics for English tests, especially at lower levels. What we would like to implement due to this review on this topic in particular is not necessarily any elimination of Anglocentric and British and even middle-class topics and themes, but the conscious addition and stronger representation of other cultures and backgrounds. And secondly, to handle certain topics carefully enough to avoid any implication and expectation that all people have the same privileges and experiences. After having reviewed the Aptis general content, or a lot of it, the aim is now to create and publish a new Aptis EDI Quality policy. I'm in the process of writing this up, along with the support and expertise of British Council colleagues such as Jamie Dunley, Cheryl Cook, Richard Spivey, and others, and also other language testing experts from Lancaster University and the University of Oxford. The policy will be based on a report of the observations of our test content as stated, and will be used by our test item writers and quality reviewers, and also by our internal team. The policy will help to ensure that our test content is not only accessible and impartial to all test candidates, it will provide regulation on creating tests that are representative and inclusive of a global candidature and for an international speaker of English. Rather than upholding and being limited to outdated stereotypes, we intend to deliberately and consciously shine a positive light on a good range of ethnicities and cultures, and to encourage diverse lifestyles and open perspectives. So thank you all for your attention today, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Well, thank you, Gemma, for your presentation. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience.
I'm happy to just take comments as well. If nobody has any questions, that just means I was super clear.
Yeah, any like comments, any comments are more than welcome.
And if not, they're probably taking a quick coffee break before the next one. I'm also very, very open to having a chat offline. If you don't want to raise your voice in this chat, then please grab my email and send me an email.
Well, okay. So I guess I'm keeping track of that. Okay, well, we got some comments here. Okay.
Looks like we have a comment from Edgar.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to see how the British Council pursues fairness in testing. Also gave me insight into ways to carry out validation of inclusion and such in testing. Well,
Thanks, Edgar. It is quite time consuming, actually. These in this individualized approach to special accommodations, but there's no question in our minds that it has to be done. It's also something that we don't charge extra for. We don't charge anything to the candidates or the clients. It's just a service that we provide everyone. Oh, great. Yes, please do contact me, Edgar. Thanks for the comment as well, Yira. Absolutely. Agreed. Respect is very important in testing and in the rest of the world. A comment from Paul as well. Oh, great. Actually, it might be useful to just say that my colleague Richard Spivey and I are in the very beginning stages, and Jamie Dunley as well. We're in the beginning stages of putting together a SIG, a special interest group for EDI focused projects and papers. And if there are people here that work in a similar area, we would love to have you join the group. So please shoot me an email and I'll keep you in the loop on that.
well, we got a couple of questions here. Edgar is asking if there are any possibilities for research with the local testing centers.
Well, we gather data on the EDI candidates. You might need to just clarify what you mean by research. We do gather data, and we are in the process right now of compiling it and analyzing it. And we definitely hope to be presenting on that in upcoming months. So as far as any other type of research, going up like beyond the data we already have, then I'd be open to talking to you about that for sure. Just send me an email. I think there's another question as well. I don't know how much time we have left, so maybe I'm kind of curious to answer this one by, is it Cheveno? Shall I just repeat it, Harold, or do you want to?
Well, it says, on the topic of inclusion, how you plan to deal with critics from individuals with traditional views. Could the test become heavily scrutinized? Persons might lose interest and do other tests.
It's a very good question, actually, and I do expect actually some places may not want to see certain groups represented or represented in a certain way. The accent, in particular, using accents of, from Europe and from Africa, from anywhere that isn't considered what is going out of style. I don't like to use this term, a native English accent. People might, and we expect this, they will recoil and go, wait a minute, this isn't the English that I'm used to. This isn't what I expect an English language test to be. And this will take a period of transition to get used to. But it was really interesting for me, the opening of the conference today. it was brought up several times that English is becoming a bit more than a second language. It's becoming the lingua franca. It's becoming an international language. It's not just a British English or an American English or an Australian English anymore. It's everyone's English. So accent shouldn't be something that we mark down, and it should be represented. People I know every day have their own insecurities about speaking English because they don't want people to hear their accent. So I think this is a really great starting point for language test providers and exam boards to take a stance on representing more accents, to say it is an international language now. As far as representation, and some cultures perhaps having issues with how we represent people in pictures, etc., well, we have to also take a stance on this, and we are selling a product that we believe in. And we may need to make some alterations based on the context for a specific test itself, as far as maybe changing, like in my earlier presentation today, I talked about changing the accent to purely American accents for an American test, but I personally don't believe we should be changing group representation and minority representation to something other than what we are standing for, and that is inclusivity. This is the backbone of the British Council, so I believe we will be taking this forward. I hope that's an okay answer.
Okay. Let's see if there are more comments. Any questions so far? Guess there are no more.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, everyone. Harold and New Directions.
Once again, thank you, Gemma.
Take care.